This episode is brought to you by Nespresso. Gift magical mornings with Nespresso Virtuo Pop. Compact and stylish, Virtuo Pop is made to meet every morning coffee craving. From espresso to coffee, hot or iced, at the click of a button. And celebrate the season with Nespresso's limited edition coffee flavors. Sweet almond and hibiscus, cinnamon and candied tamarind, and festive double espresso. Magic in the making. Shop the holiday gift collection exclusively at Nespresso.com.
The all-new 2026 Hyundai Palisade Hybrid doesn't just turn heads. It commands respect. With its stunning exterior, luxurious interior with available captain seats, and spacious third-row seating and equipped with advanced technology, you and the family are making a statement before you even step out. Okay, Hyundai. Visit HyundaiUSA.com to learn more and experience the all-new 2026 Palisade Hybrid today.
Welcome back to Generals and Napoleon, part 2 of our top 15 commanders of the Napoleonic Age. This is sort of our ultimate listing of the top 15 commanders. If you haven't listened to part 1, please give that a go, but we're going to jump back into it here in a minute with special guests Rachael Stark, Jonas de Neef, Nick Kramer, Graeme Callister, and Major Mike Hamel. Before we begin, I'd like to remind all of our listeners that if they'd like to support our podcast, please go to patreon.com/Generals and Napoleon. We truly appreciate any and all support we get. If you'd like to support our podcasts in other ways, please go to our YouTube page and hit subscribe, or rate and review our podcast wherever podcasts are heard. Now, on with the show. We're going to give the floor to Nick now and let him run through his 15. Yeah, Nick, you can go 15 on back to 1 if you want.
Yeah, I kind of like going 15 to 1. You kind of just like build the suspense of like, even though we're probably assuming that Napoleon be number 1, but this was a fun exercise. When I was like perfecting the list, over the past couple of days, like I had 11 no doubters that would be in the top 15. And then about 15 or 20 others that were competing for those final 4 spots. So it was fun. Those 11 weren't in like any particular order, but those were the ones where they're somewhere in there. So at 15, I'm going to do a name that nobody has said yet. I'm going to go with Scharnhorst. Now, he dies in 1813, so you don't get to see him in the latter half in the fall campaign or in 1814. But I think it's worth mentioning him, because he's a chief of staff in 1806 to the Duke of Brunswick. And then after, he's the most instrumental figure, him and Stein, in reforming the Prussian state and the Prussian army. The Prussian army that you see in 13 and 14 is really only there because of what Scharnhorst does. The Landwehr as well, it doesn't come to like full conscription later on, but that's his brainchild. Without him, the Prussian army is nothing in 1813 and 1814, probably doesn't even exist. He was the head of the Prussian Military Academy. His most famous student is a guy by the name of Clausewitz. Don't know if we've ever heard of him before. So I think he deserves an ode on this list even at 15, is because he's so instrumental in reforming the Prussian army that was absolutely decimated at Jena and Auerstadt in 1806. To make it a fighting force again in 1813 to compete against Napoleon. So I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. In 14, I'm going to have Gneisenau. Again, nobody's mentioned him yet, but he was the chief of staff for Blücher in 1813, 1814, 1815. And while Blücher gets a lot of the credit for his movement, it's Gneisenau who is in lockstep with him and helps Blücher see the grand strategic, the tactical, just the finer things that are going on in warfare. So I think he deserves a lot of credit for dictating Prussian strategy in 1813, 1814. In Blücher's ear, telling him what to do, kind of encouraging him a lot of times to be like, hey, no, like you need to do this and not abide by this or whatever they're telling you. So he's kind of like lesser known Berthier, but he's really in charge of Prussian strategy. So I think he deserves number 14. 13, this is going to be the unpopular one. And maybe a little biased. I have Prince Schwarzenberg. Was he a great tactician? No. Let's just be frank. No, he wasn't. Especially at Leipzig, not very good. A lot of the criticism that he gets is that he's very conservative, very laid back. But I forget who it was that said Wellington was the same way, and you'd appreciate that. But whenever you talk about Schwarzenberg, he's lacking initiative. He's not taking the battle to the enemy, but kind of in the same vein. I think he also deserves this credit, or a spot on this list, is because he had the toughest job of any commander in the Napoleonic era. He was the supreme commander in 1813 and 1814. That was a new title. Nobody had held that yet. Why did the previous 5 coalitions fail? Because the Allies couldn't get their ducks in a row. They couldn't orchestrate strategy. So in 1813, they were like, hey, we need to have a supreme commander to have a cohesive strategy. And that's Schwarzenberg. Now, again, he's brave as like a cavalry commander at Ulm, but his main background is politics. He was minister in Paris in 1809. He was there in Russia as well. So he has a great grasp of both the political and the military realm of warfare, and that's important. Just a little bit of insight into what he dealt with in 1813 and 14. He had all 3 Allied monarchs tailing him at all times. Frederick William III, Francis, and most notably Tsar Alexander, who is tough to deal with in 1813 and 14, to put it mildly. So not only does Schwarzenberg have to oversee his own army, which is huge, the Army of Bohemia has over 200,000 people in it, but he also has to kind of coordinate the actions of Bernadotte when he can, and keep in contact with Blucher and run the Silesian army as well. And then he has 3 monarchs breathing down his neck. Let's put it this way. Imagine if Dwight Eisenhower had FDR and Churchill in his office at all times. Like FDR in World War II, pretty hands-off. Let's Ike do whatever he wants. Churchill's a little bit more hands-on, but imagine if FDR and Churchill were breathing down Ike's neck every day. That's what Schwarzenberg dealt with, especially with Alexander. I'm doing research on 1814. Schwarzenberg is very ill. He's in bed. Alexander, in the middle of the night, gets on a horse and bursts into Schwarzenberg's bedroom, flashing a piece of paper at him. Is like, what are you going to do about this? And he's like sitting on his bed. I couldn't even imagine. Maybe a little biased, but I think Schwarzenberg, just for being kind of the glue that holds the coalition together in 1813 and 14, deserves the 13th spot. 12, I have Suchet. You guys have him higher than me. I think it's just I have him lower because he earns his marshal's baton later. He's the only one who gets a baton because of what he does in Spain. Not as widely remembered, but I think he does kind of get a little bit overrated at times. I mean, Napoleon on St. Helena said he was his best general, and, if I had 2 Suchets, I would have conquered Spain. Not saying he's wrong, but I think there are also just other guys I liked more. Because I tended to give a little bit more weight to leading from the front, charismatic leaders, organizers, because I like that in a leader. So 11, I have Ney. I couldn't put him any lower. A lot of me wanted to put him higher, but as Michael said, our Dr. Vater is Dr. Legere, and if he heard this, he'd probably be screaming like, oh my God, how could you even have Ney on the list? I get it. Ney is kind of a tactical bozo at times. Like Waterloo is a disaster. He gets absolutely decimated at Denowitz in 1813. It's not his shtick. He's not really good at the tactical level, but he's the heart and soul of the Grande Armée. Everybody flocks to his side. He's incredibly brave, and that's worth something, especially in this era of warfare where you have to get in a line and charge at the enemy with bayonet point. You need somebody that you'd flock to, and that's Ney. Especially, crossing the Dnieper in 1812 during the retreat. Like when he comes back, everybody thought he was dead. Everybody like basically is like crying tears of joy that he's returned. That says a lot about him. But, I can't have any higher because he's just so tactically bad. But one other note about Ney is he also did have a keen eye for talent, especially in his staff. His most famous staff officer was Jomini, and he gave him a platform to write and to publish. So I think he deserves a lot of credit for that as well. But he's this high because of his bravery, and I think that deserves a lot. You need somebody you could follow in the battle. Like at Waterloo, he had 5 horses shot out from under him. That's brave, and I think he deserves a spot. 10, I know he's not the most popular figure. I have Murat at 10. He was the best, beau sabre. Yeah, he's a womanizer. And is he duplicitous? Sure, especially at the end. But when he was on, he was by far the best cavalry commander of the time, and it's not even close. Especially in 1805, his reconnaissance against the Austrians. They bluff an Austrian general into surrendering a bridge. His charge at Eylau is legendary, where after Augereau marches the wrong way and is, in this blinding snowstorm, and his corps gets decimated. Napoleon famously just turns to Murat as like, what are you going to do about it? So he leads, 10,000 horse, and they save the army. So incredibly brave, has drip and swag for days. The Cossacks in 1813 wanted to capture him alive, and they actually respected him because of his dress, which made him stand out on the battlefield. I also think his ability to fight a rearguard action in 1813 isn't looked at enough. Because everybody likes to blame Schwarzenberg and the Bohemian Army for being lethargic and slow. But him and Marshal Victor and Saint-Cyr, they pulled off the massive allied army of Bohemia for the better part of 2 weeks. Only allowed them to march 70 miles because of their delaying action. This enables Napoleon to concentrate his entire force at Leipzig. So that's overlooked. But Murat, the best cavalry commander of the time, I think he deserves a top 10 spot. Number 9, I have Blucher, Marshal Forwards. Doesn't really get a significant shot at independent command until 1813 when he's given the army of Silesia. But his defense at Lubeck in 1806 is the only bright spot for Prussia in that whole entire war. In 1813, he was brilliant, wins the Battle of the Katzbach against MacDonald, crosses the Elbe to set up the Battle of Leipzig. He vehemently adhered to the Reichenbach plan, like Michael alluded to earlier. He and Gneisenau are instrumental in advocating for a continuation of the war into France in 1814. This is often forgotten, but it seems obvious now that it's like, yeah, we need to pursue Napoleon into France in the last half of 1813 and into 1814. No, there were only 3 people that wanted to continue the war. Blucher, Gneisenau, and Alexander. And they are very vocal in it. And that was the right course of action. You had to defeat Napoleon on French soil. But I alluded to it earlier. His army is the soul of the coalition in 13 and 14. They have the strategic, the motivational, the emotional gravity with them. And Napoleon, if he had a choice to go after the Bohemian army or Blucher, even though Blucher's force is half the size, he always went after him because he recognized that that's where the heart of the coalition was. And it was needed, that he needed somebody aggressive who was willing to take the fight to the French, not just wait for Napoleon to hang himself. You had to take it to him. 8, I have Berthier. Some of you guys have excluded him. I have him high. He's here only because of his staff work. The whole French staff system is his. It's his child. Now, disclaimer, is it easy for his staff to operate when the guy who runs everything is Napoleon? Sure, yes, but if you want to if you want to see how important a birthday was, is look at Napoleon's orders and then look at what gets sent out side by side. Napoleon had a tendency to ramble and not make a lot of sense and just kind of go on like long diatribes about the strategic picture. Birthday would take all that information and condense it down to where everybody could understand it. And I think that is important because without Berthier, the army doesn't work. You don't get orders out. And one of the biggest what ifs of the Napoleonic era is, what if Berthier doesn't fall out that window and die before Waterloo? What if he's the chief of staff in 1815 instead of Soult? Honestly, a lot of me wanted to have him higher. But why do I have him here? When he is an independent commander in 1809, it goes terribly. Davout almost gets encircled because of him. And he had no real input in strategy either. But like I said, it's hard to imagine French success without Berthier. So that's why I think he is so high for me. 7, I'm going to have Massena, the spoiled child of victory. Loads of experience dating back to 1775. In the first Italian campaign, he is magnificent. In another world, he probably should have been given command of the army of Italy instead of this General Bonaparte guy, whoever he is. He should have, in a lot of ways, deserved that command. He was brilliant in the first Italian campaign. He beats Suvorov in 1799 at Zurich. That had, beating Suvorov would basically just be like beating the Chiefs in the NFL. It hardly ever happened. He was great, especially in 1809 at Aspern-Essling, even when he was brought of semi-retirement. And he was also great at Wagram as well. He would be higher if not for what happened in the peninsula. But as you guys have alluded to, I don't really think anybody does well in the peninsula. And one of his staff officers said, he's barely 50, but he looks, in his mid to late 60s. He looked terrible. He walked with a hunch. He wanted to sleep more often than not. So he was past his prime. So I don't think you should hold that too much against him. 6, I have Soult, old Iron Arm. He proved himself at Zurich in 1799, led the main attack at Austerlitz. Great planner, great at the tactical level. Again, not the best commander in Spain, but he didn't drown. He actually kind of held the ship together at a lot of times. He's brought back to fight in Germany in the spring of 1813. And then he gets sent back to Spain in, late 1813. And he makes Wellington earn it. He makes Wellington earn every inch of in Spain in 1813 and in France in 1814. Soult deserves a lot of credit. He's great. Very inspired leader, very hard on his men. They called him Iron Arm. A lot of other French marshals were questioning how hard he was drilling his men. But, his corps were the best because of their training. That leads me to 5. And I have Archduke Charles at 5th. Why do I have him so high? Well, like Michael alluded to earlier, especially in the First Coalition War, he was fantastic. He was fantastic against Moreau, who he'll lose to later. He was great against Moreau and Jourdan. He won battles at Würzburg, Hamburg, and others. He also won the First Battle of Zurich. He wins in Mannheim in 1799. He's great. Now, the Austrians screw themselves in 1805 when they think the main theater of war is going to be Italy, so they send Charles there. Well, Napoleon is in Germany, and he gets to go up against Mack, who is not on the level of Charles. And then, Charles doesn't perform well, but the war's already over, and he's trying to, save as many lives as possible by retreating. So he's not responsible for Ulm, and, we can do counterfactuals or what-ifs, but if he's in command instead of Mack, probably doesn't happen. And then after the disaster of 1805 and 1806, he reforms the army. He is the head of reforming the Austrian army. And that army in 1809 that he leads against Napoleon at Aspern-Essling and Wagram is night and day better than what it was in 1805. And he had to jump through a lot of hoops to get that army to what it was in 1809. A lot of conservatism in court. His brother is the, Kaiser Francis. You're also dealing with a multi-ethnic polity, which is the Habsburg Empire. You have like dozens of ethnicities, dozens of languages. So the fact that he reformed that army is spectacular. And he makes it a very formidable force in 1809. And then he falls out of favor again. He ruffles a lot of feathers. But I also give Charles a lot of praise because he told it how it was. He doesn't want to go to war in 1805. He thinks the army isn't ready. They basically tell him to go, pound rocks. We're doing it anyways. He says the army isn't ready in 1809, but they're like, we're doing it anyways. Figure it out. He's like, okay, I'm just telling you. And that's why he, falls out of favor. But Charles is Napoleon's greatest adversary, as Gunther Rothenberg alluded to in his book. I think he's worthy of that title. That brings us to the top 4. I have Lon at 4. If he didn't die at Aspern-Essling, probably could have been higher. Led the way as a general in Italy in 1800. He was great in 1805 against the Austrians. His finest hour is probably Friedland, where he fights a delaying action that holds the Russians off for a significant period of time while they're trying to cross the bridge. That allows Napoleon time to get the army there to win the decisive battle at Friedland, and eventually obliterate the Russians. Charismatic leader, his men loved him. He loved leading from the front, which I can commend. Unlike Soult, who liked to hang in the back at times. Everybody loved Lon. Yeah, he kind of had a tiff with Bessières, but all marshals had tiffs. But Lon deserves, and when he's killed, his Napoleon weeps at his side, and his death sends shockwaves throughout France, and rightfully so. Lon was always at the front, and if you had to pick one guy to lead an assault other than Davout, you would pick Lon. 3. This is going to be controversial. I have Wellington. I have Wellington at 3. Is he my favorite guy? No. He's brash and arrogant and high-handed. But Wellington has a great grasp of the political arm. Now, is he helped by the fact that his brother is in the government? Yes. But he's keenly aware of the larger picture in Spain, and he can't risk his army. And that's a lot of generals, are often criticized for not being bold, like Schwarzenberg is heavily criticized for not being bold. Here's the thing, you need armies to fight wars. And Wellington knew that if his army suffered a huge defeat, it's over. There's no funding going to the peninsula anymore. So he does a good job of picking his spots and striking the French at the most opportune time. He's often regarded as, the masters of defense, which he is. Kind of a misnomer. He's actually great at sharp attacking movements, not just this guy who sits on his hands and waits for the defense. Wins at Waterloo. That's his finest hour, obviously. But here's the thing. Why do I have him behind Davout? Well, Wellington, he faced Soult, but he never faced the best of the French army, especially in Spain. In 1815 at Waterloo, the French army of 1815 is not even close, not even the same galaxy as it was in 1805. He never had to face the best of the French army. He's facing a disenchanted Massena. And the biggest thing is he didn't face the guy who's number 2 on my list, Marshal Davout. Without a doubt, I'm part of the Massena Society, so probably shouldn't say this out loud. Without a doubt, Marshal Davout is Napoleon's best marshal. Auerstadt, just that battle alone gets him a top 5 spot. Fights a battle that nobody on earth should win. He was great as an administrator in Hamburg. Was he ruthless? Yeah. But when it came to the continental system, that was the only time it worked, was when Davout was in charge of Hamburg. That was the only time. He was tough, on his men, but he was respected because while he demanded a lot out of his men, he demanded more out of himself. And his men respected him for that. He's kind of like, if you've ever seen Band of Brothers, he's kind of like Captain Sobel, except qualified to be in the position. He worked hard. He was always just drove the men to extraordinary lengths. Michael mentioned it earlier, Auschwitz doesn't happen without Davout. Marching 70 miles in 48 hours with, 50 to 60 pounds in your back. That's just a feat of strength that his men got that I don't know if anybody else could get from their men. He's great in 1809 at Egmul, especially. That was a pretty disastrous situation he extricates himself from. And then after that, you don't really hear a lot from him. In 1812, he kind of has a little bit of a falling, but it's worth noting, at Borodino, he wants to advocate for the flanking maneuver and is told basically no. And I think he, for the first time in his, a lot of marshals wanted to see him be knocked down a peg, so I don't really think he gets a lot of support in 1812. But the other thing is, why does Napoleon lose in 1813, 14, and 15? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but guess who they never really had to fight? They never had to fight Davout. He was sent to Hamburg, where he does a great job. It has to form a brand new corps, the 13th Corps, from scratch. They have no men. They're in the armistice of Clausewitz. He scratches together some French, some Danish soldiers, and it becomes a very formidable force in 1813. But the fact that he's not used, in my opinion, Napoleon's biggest blunder. Like, he has Oudinot commanding the army of, going against, the army of Germany. That's insane. The fact that Davout was sidelined in 13 and then he's stuck, holding on in Hamburg. He only surrenders Hamburg in May of 1814, weeks after Napoleon abdicates. And then in 1815, I think it was Rachael mentioned earlier, the army only is organized because of Davout as Minister of War. But then again, you're taking away your best battlefield commander. No coincidence that whenever Davout isn't there, the army seems to do a little bit worse, if not a lot worse. Number one, let's not beat around the bush. We obviously know who it is. I mean, this is called the Napoleonic Era, not the Davout era. So Napoleon Bonaparte, number one. I mean, the syllabus for my first class with Dr. Legere said that the number one most written on person is Jesus Christ, and number two is Napoleon Bonaparte. The man has aura. He just has mystique. There's a whole era named after him. Revolutionaries warfare from the core level. Great strategist. Best ruler, probably not. But in my opinion, he's probably the best general of the modern era. That's debatable, but in my opinion, he's just awesome. So Napoleon Bonaparte, number one.
Hey, this is Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast, here to tell you that Michelob Ultra, the official beer partner of the NBA, is bringing NBA fans closer than ever this season with chances to win great prizes, including courtside tickets. Enter now at michelobultra.com/courtside. Michelob Ultra Courtside 25 to 26. No purchase necessary. Open to U.S. residents 21 plus. Begins on October 1st, 2025 and ends on June 30th, 2026. Multiple entry periods. See official rules at michelobultra.com/courtside for free entry deadlines, prizes, and details.
If we knew more about our sleep, what would we do differently? Would we go to bed at a consistent time or take steps to reduce interruptions to our sleep? With the all-new Sleep Score, Apple Watch measures your bedtime consistency, interruptions, and sleep duration. Then, every morning it combines these factors into an easy-to-understand score from 1 to 100. So you'll know how to take the quality of your sleep from good to excellent. Introducing the new Sleep Score on Apple Watch. iPhone 11 or later required.
Really good stuff. Love it, love it, love it. Okay. A couple things. I didn't think we'd get a Captain Sobel mention in this podcast, so thank you for that, Nick. That was awesome. But I think you made a new best friend to Rachael Stark by having Davout so high. So thank you for that as well. Let's take it around the horn real quick, and then I'll let Graeme go. Rachael, what'd you think?
Obviously, having Davout number two. No, again, really well argued. It was nice to see different names. Actually, most of the names you've mentioned that I've not are in my honourable mentions. Nothing to gripe about.
Okay. Jonas?
Yeah, can agree with the list. I think maybe the only thing that made me put Davout a bit lower is basically like overall, I kind of feel as 1813 progresses, as much as Hamburg and as Nick argues how important that flank is when it comes to I mean, maybe it sounds like a nitpick, but it is worth mentioning. Like there's a little bit of misconception what happens at Hamburg in terms of the toil on the local population. There it shows where when he is really stern at going about doing his things, locals can suffer. I think numbers kind of go widely on these things, but a couple of 10,000 people get sent out the place, and basically it gets razed to the ground just in that ditch effort to keep that flank going. Then also 1812, that where maybe that the glimpses of invincibility kind of gets like dented in with how he does in 1812. But then again, as gloomy as that campaign is, who would have fared as well as he did? Yeah, but overall, like a very good list. Props for putting Archduke Charles a bit higher. He is quite underrated. It's like I alluded to as well. Like I feel like, especially how complex the Austrian army was to basically put it together, and I feel like kind of like a misunderstood thing about the whole multinational aspect of that army and making it function the way it did I feel it's quite interesting.
Okay, Mike, how do we do?
One, Captain Sobel did nothing wrong. He's a good officer. His easy company wasn't that good. And if you look at a lot of the interviews after the fact, a lot of those soldiers attributed their success to the hard training under Captain Sobel. Agree that Davout not being used in 1813 is a travesty, especially when you have MacDonald commanding an army and losing at Kotzbach. Schwarzenberg, no. The whole point of the Trachenberg plan was to not engage Napoleon, and that's created in July 1813. What does he immediately do in August? You have the Battle of Dresden, where he outnumbers Napoleon 2-1 and just runs right into his face. Also, he's planning for Leipzig. Yes, they win, but his operational plan was to let his subordinate commanders do whatever they want to, and Napoleon was able to get away. He is dealing with a whole bunch of heads of state, but I disagree with Schwarzenberg being in the top 15. Other than that, I think it's a good list.
I'll just offer a rebuttal to Dresden. That is, it's not he gets there, but then Alexander and especially Frederick William III want to fight because they're like, hey, he's here, and like we need Dresden. And Frederick William III famously said, when has an army twice the size ever backed down? Because like the French shout "Vive l'Empereur," and like when have we ever run away from somebody just yelling a name? And he also, Schwarzenberg does send like a cancellation order to the attack, but it's somehow not carried out by the time 4 p.m. rolls around and then the signal goes off. But yeah, I knew Schwarzenberg would be a controversial one, but I think just dealing with all that and just running his own army and having to deal with all these heads of state, that's basically the only reason I have him there.
He's on my list too, so we're getting to that. Graham, what'd you think about Nick's list?
Yeah, another really good list. I definitely wouldn't have had Murat or Soult as high as they are, or indeed in the top 15 at all. Quite frankly, I think both have significant problems as commanders. On a good day, they can be good. On a bad day, both are pretty awful. A Porto for Soult is just humiliating. Murat is probably the most chastised of all Napoleon's marshals. Repeated messages saying, "Can you stop being stupid?" in the vanguard. You're there for scouting, not for exhausting the cavalry. So no, I have problems with both, but actually I don't see a problem with having them in the top 15 because they both also have records. If you look at their good days, they are really good. I'm not entirely sure we can, say that the French marshals are free of blame in Spain and that no one could have won it, because that means that for Wellington it was unlosable, which then means that Wellington probably needs to be bumped down to the bottom of this list. But I see why people have Soult and Murat on there. I just wouldn't have them as high personally. But that's the beauty of this. We have great minds that just disagree on subjectivities. But no, overall, I really like that list. I especially like the forensic defense of Schwarzenberg, because I think he deserves it. I really did like the pitch for him, which may or may not be a spoiler for what's about to come up.
Very good. All right, well, we're going to let Graham roll here, and we will all listen in intently.
Okay, so here's where I completely get myself open to slaughter. I've put this list together with a few things in mind, and one is that some of these officers represent kind of a wider category within the Napoleonic Wars, thinking officers, doing officers, etc. Some are intellectuals, some are staff officers, some are leading from the front. And so while a few of them probably aren't in the top 15 of actual commanders, they kind of represent a group, if you know what I mean, and they're the best one in that group. And so at number 15, I'm going for someone that's been mentioned but not actually in the list yet, and that is Antoine-Henri Jomini. Jomini is Swiss-born, but of course he spends most of his time in the French army, where he's chief of staff mostly to Marshal Ney. He can take some credit for some of Ney's successes, but why I've mostly included him is that he represents the branch of the more intellectual generals of the Napoleonic Wars, the thinkers who wrote treatises that would influence not just the next war, but the one after that, and indeed into the 20th century. The most famous of them is Clausewitz, but he's more junior, and his work is quite frankly more turgid. But also he is less influential through the 19th century. So I've included Jomini on my list really as he represents that intellectual strand of generals. At 14, I've gone for Eugene de Beauharnais, Napoleon's stepson. He's often overlooked, Viceroy of Italy, then becomes the leader of the Italian army because of that. He is a decent commander in his own right. He comes to a command at a very young age. But he maybe hasn't had the same formative experience of someone like Napoleon, who obviously also came to command at a young age. For me, Eugene really epitomizes the Napoleonic ideal of a leader of a client state. He's militarily and diplomatically astute. He is fiercely loyal to Napoleon. He does win notable victories, but also his victories always aim towards the wider strategic picture. Rarely is Napoleon saying that he's gone off and done something outrageous. 1809, I'd say, is a really good year for Eugene. He really shows his mettle there. I know he does lose a battle or two, but he essentially wins in the Italian theatre, and then his actions at Wagram and also afterwards are pretty good. He does well 1812 to 14 as well. So there are definitely better generals out there, but there are a few who have this kind of personal and familial constraints that Eugene does. And so he's on my list, as a man who does achieve big things in spite of a lot of that. Number 13 is von Scharnhorst. We've already heard about him, so I won't go into too much detail. He's Hanoverian by birth. He transfers to the Prussian army at the age of about 40, I think, so he's already quite experienced when he gets there. He's probably not a top field commander, and he wouldn't be most people's go-to for that, but he is one of the few Prussian commanders to come out of 1806 with any credit, even though he's mostly a chief of staff. But it is really his reforms of the Prussian army that get him on my list. He drags it from being, Frederick the Great's military machine into something much more modern, much more appropriate to what was going on through the Revolutionary, but also especially Napoleonic Wars. And it is him that really lays the groundwork for those victories of 1813 onwards, even though he dies early in 1813. So, he's on my list. I think Nick gave a good defense of him earlier. Number 12 is Bagration, a Russian general of Georgian descent. He's been mentioned before. For me, he's a hard-fighting general, astute, bit of a kind of almost no-nonsense kind of general. He plays a prominent role in 1805, then he fights against the Swedes, the Ottomans, and he leads an army in 1812 as well. I think had he not been killed at Borodino, he'd have played a big role in defeating Napoleon in 1813. He was much more aggressive and less cautious than Barclay. He was much more tactically adept than someone like Benningsen. Now, Bagration was a very good general for the Russian army. He never quite got to the very top, but he was probably on a trajectory to get there, and I dare say would have done good things had he actually got there. Number 11 represents the staff officers on this, and that is Berthier. For some, it might be controversial that he's on here because he's not a general in the traditional sense, as a few other people have said. But what's great about Berthier is that as Napoleon's chief of staff, he really carves his own niche. He's not just going into a role that someone else has already determined. He redesigns the French staff around the needs of Napoleon, and he really is the linchpin of that system. And I think, the debacle of 1815 and the staff work of 1815 really just shows how valuable Berthier was as an individual. He's quite low on my list, though, because as a field commander, he's appalling. In 1809, he makes a total pig's ear of it. He does hang Davout out to dry, and pulls rank over him as well to do this. So as a field commander, he's not ideal, but his abilities as a staff officer and as the senior of the marshals is absolutely second to none. There are maybe gaps in his staff work. Early 1807 isn't great, but his talents are pretty unique. So for me, he's deserving of a place on the list. Number 10, Kutuzov. Some people might put Kutuzov higher because of 1812. Some might not include him at all. But I thought he just about deserves a place in the top 10. He's not the most gifted commander. He's good in the retreat in 1805 and 1812. He's good at motivating troops. He has some significant successes against the Ottomans, but he doesn't come off too well at Austerlitz or Borodino. We can say that Austerlitz wasn't his fault, but equally he wasn't commander of the army. As Schwarzenberg did later, he could have tried to put his own stamp on it a bit more. I'm inclined to give him some credit for harrying Napoleon in 1812. I think that is overrated sometimes, what he did. But clearly, his personality, as much as anything, helped to keep the Russian army together in adversity, and he's very much a deserving commander. Moving on to number 9, I've gone for Blucher. He's in the top 10 because of what he represents as much as because of him. And he represents the fighting spirit of many Europeans, especially Germans and especially Prussians, going into 1813-15. He was a good tactician. He was aggressive but measured. He was pretty straightforward and wasn't maybe the best strategist. His interest in mundane details like food and ammunition was sometimes a bit limited, which is why he needed a good chief of staff. We've already had a nice mention to Gneisenau. But Blucher definitely has his moments. Pushing on Paris in 1814 took courage. The march to support Wellington at Waterloo, I've already mentioned. One of the most fantastic movements of the period, if considered in isolation. All of this is really in his favour. So Blucher just about makes the top 10. And now here is where I can hear knives being sharpened. For number 8, I'm going for Prince Schwarzenberg. Now, I struggled a bit to place this man because he is a bit of a ponderous commander. He does make mistakes, but he is ultimately successful. And he does manage to balance the military and the diplomatic exceptionally well and with growing confidence through 1813 and 14. He doesn't command an independent army before 1813. And one of his more notable efforts early on is to kind of, sign up to the Trachtenberg plan and then immediately abandon it. The plan itself running away when Napoleon hoves into view is, okay, it might work, but maybe not the best. Then immediately abandoning it and getting thrashed at Dresden, not ideal. But he grows into his role. He wins at Kulm. He wins at Leipzig, despite errors. He is pretty important in essentially the steamroller that runs over the French defences in 1814. And I think the key thing, and this has already been outlined, but the key thing he does is keeping a firm military command despite the presence of the Tsar, the Emperor of Austria, and the King of Prussia at his headquarters. Kutuzov didn't manage to do that in 1805. He basically let himself get overruled by monarchs meddling. Schwarzenberg did ultimately manage to keep military control. So I understand why some people wouldn't have him here. I understand why some people might think he shouldn't be anywhere near the top 10. But overall, I thought he deserved a place, lower down in the top 10. Number 7, I've gone for Jean Lannes. I really like Lannes, and I do struggle to judge him slightly because I do really like him. As a tactician, he's brilliant. He's aggressive but measured. He's great in attack and defense. He wins a series of semi-independent battlefield victories, one of which at Saalfeld in 1806 is currently taught as a literal textbook example of a double envelopment. Friedland is really underrated, what he does to draw the Russian army across the river and allow them to be pinned for that battle. Some people have dismissed him as a vanguard general, but I think that really misunderstands the importance of vanguard work, which requires circumspection, excellent strategic understanding, and operational understanding, as well as simply tactical. It's notable that Lannes gets chastised a lot less than Murat in that regard when the two of them are at the head of the army. Murat and Lannes really don't get on. Lannes despises Murat, which isn't ideal, but they still function together on the battlefield, Austerlitz being a good example. Lannes does have semi-independent commands in Spain, for example, where he does very well. He could be petulant. He does leave the army for a year after Austerlitz, which isn't ideal. But overall, I think that Lannes is one of the very best marshals. Had he lived, it's another one of the great what ifs, isn't it? So I do like him. I've put him at number 7 just because I think there's 6 people more deserving. 6, I've got Andre Massena. What more can we say? The darling child of victory. On his day, he is probably the best commander after Napoleon, with a caveat that I've got another Frenchman after this. Massena is bold, he's audacious, he's dogged in defence, he can motivate men, he knows how to manoeuvre, he's got it all. His most impressive feat arguably comes as Zurich in the Revolutionary Wars, but even 1809 is a fantastic campaign. Aspen, Essling and Wagram he does very well, but also the pursuit afterwards. He is really good in 1809. He goes off the boil 1810 to 11, but we've already discussed why. He is quite literally caught with his pants down a couple of times, which is something to go against him. And this is not just in 1810 at Busaco, but also all the way back in 1796. At Dago, there are rumours that he's busy in a dalliance while his army is being attacked. So, he has his blind spots, and he's an inveterate looter, but he is, for me, one of the top military minds of the era. Number 5, I've gone for Archduke Charles. He's in the top 5 here. Some people might be surprised, but he is probably one of Austria's most capable ever field commanders. He's a couple of years younger than Napoleon. He's the younger brother of Emperor Francis. So he's put into command at a very early age, not having necessarily earned it, but by family connection. But he turns out to be an excellent field commander and army administrator. He's a shrewd strategist, a good tactician, and personally very courageous under fire as well. As a planner, he's actually one of the best of the era, even if those plans don't always come off. Probably best known for defeating Napoleon at Aspen Essling in 1809, but as we've talked about, a much longer career back into the 1790s, which is really impressive. And also, I think he deserves credit because if we think of the wider context, Napoleon gives himself and his marshals the military and the political context to succeed. But the Austrian court often does more to hamstring than to help their military commanders. And despite that, Charles really achieves quite a lot. He makes some headway with reforming the army. He really does well in 1809. He probably lacks confidence in himself. Who doesn't? But, I think he's a very good commander nonetheless. So the top 4, again, knives I can hear being sharpened, because at number 4, I've got the Duke of Wellington. Surprisingly, this is my only British entry, but I think he's deserving to be near the top of any list. He's a very shrewd strategist, naval tactician, exceptional planner. He really does focus on the mundane details of logistics that make his campaigns work. I think he also needs credit for being a very adept diplomat. He spends his entire career working with coalition and allied forces. He never commands just his own army, and he has remarkable success in doing that. He also does have weaknesses, though, and I think the weaknesses around sieges are well known, but also he's not very good at Napoleonic-style pursuits, and he's not very good in retreat. So, he's an exceptional commander, but I think there are blind spots there. That said, he wins repeatedly, battle after battle, campaign after campaign. He is victorious, and so he's very rightly held up as a colossus of his age. Number 3, I've gone for Suvorov. It's a bit of a cheeky one because he dies in 1800, so he's not really Napoleonic, but Suvorov deserves to be considered as one of the great commanders of the era, widely understood. He's again a superb leader, excellent operational strategist, very good tactician. He serves against Prussia, against the Ottomans, against Poland, and of course against French revolutionary armies. And he gives several of the big names a drubbing, including Moreau, including MacDonald. He gets himself out of a trap in Switzerland in 1799 with brilliance that Massena could only marvel at. And quite literally, Massena says this is one of the most brilliant maneuvers he's ever seen. So Suvorov really is another giant of a general. He doesn't face Napoleon, and arguably he doesn't face any top-notch French commanders at their peak with their best armies. But his victories are also possibly the most Napoleonic, if we can say that, of any enemy commander. In the scale of casualties inflicted, the destruction he wreaks on the enemy army. At Trebia, for example, he virtually annihilates MacDonald's force, doesn't just beat it. So for me, Suvorov deserves his place at the top of this list. And the top 2, I did say before, Massena may be the most adept French commander after Napoleon, but actually number 2, I've gone for Davout. For 2 reasons. Davout, I think, is a superb commander. We've already talked about him. I'm not going to enumerate everything again. But the second reason is that he is balding, short-sighted, and middle-aged. And if a grumpy, balding, short-sighted, and middle-aged man can't get to the top of this list, well, I wouldn't be doing my job right. So, as an icon of style for those of us who are follically challenged and short-sighted, Davout is getting up there. In all honesty, again, I struggled to place him. He could have been a bit lower on my list, but I do really like him as a commander. I really rate Auerstedt. I think in 1812, Napoleon would have been better served listening to Davout a bit more. I do think that the speed with which he kind of advanced and then retreated wasn't suited to Napoleon. But equally, Napoleon might have tried to fit things more towards what First Corps was doing rather than just insist on his own plans. So Davout is there. And at number one, it will shock everyone to hear I've gone for Napoleon. Napoleon has been probably more criticised than many commanders of this era, bizarrely, also more lauded, of course. But the criticisms, I think, are often exaggerated because fundamentally he is a superb strategist. He is excellent as a tactician. He's a very mediocre diplomat. I think he couldn't quite marry the military means to the political ends. But without doubt, Napoleon is the towering general of his age. So that is my 15.
Fantastic. Applause all around for that. That was great. Especially shout out to Davout's physical uniqueness with the baldness and the glasses. That was great. Rachel, I'll let you go first. I'm sure you like that part.
Yeah, hooray for specky antisocial people. But yeah, knocked it out of the park. I can't argue with any of that.
Good stuff. Jonas?
Yeah, I fully agree. The reasons that Graeme brings in, especially for Suvorov, are very convincing. Because actually, when you think about it, when he comes into the theater of war, 1798, 1799, he basically rolls up basically what Napoleon achieved in earlier on. It was a huge threat, which is in a lot of literature gets oversighted. So that's why I feel like the way how we basically steamroll that in the span of 1 or 2 years is actually just quite astounding.
Yeah, I like to shout out Jomini at 15 as well. Mike Hamel, what do you think?
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Love the Jomini shout out. Because, I mean, even if you look until today, if you look at the U.S. Army's principles of war, they are pretty much exactly the same as Jomini's. We use 9 out of his 11. I would say Jomini still has a very much a big impact on modern military operations in theory.
Okay. Hey, Kramer, your thoughts?
Yeah, basically echo what everybody says. It's a fantastic list. I feel vindicated that I also had Scharnhorst and Schwarzenberg as well. But yeah, and I think the Suvorov inclusion is great, especially since you read about all the Russian generals, especially after he dies. It's, this guy studied under Suvorov or he was on his staff. So there's this mysticism around Suvorov and this lore that he has that is quite fascinating to study. Surprised Wellington's so low, not unhappy, but very well argued, and having Charles high as well also warms my heart.
Very good. Very good. Okay. So last but not least is your host, and I'm going to fly through my list. So while I'm going through my list, I'm going to ask my guests, after I'm done, we're going to do our honorable mentions. But if you could limit those to no more than 5, I'll do my list, and then we'll go to honorable mentions of each guest. Okay. Number 15 for me, Marshal Berthier. Without Marshal Berthier's genius, I don't think there is a Napoleon. Maybe there's a Napoleon for 2 or 3 years, but certainly not for 20. So huge Marshal Berthier fan. Number 14, I had to get a naval commander in here, so it has to be Admiral Nelson. Shout out to my friends at the U.S. Naval War College, Evan Wilson, Josh Meeks, John Kuhn. I didn't want to get yelled at by them for not having a naval commander in here, but if you look at Nelson's body of work, I mean, just incredible. Cape St. Vincent, obviously the Battle of the Nile, Trafalgar, really a unique and innovative naval commander. And it's too bad he died when he did. Number 13, Bagration, god of the army, kind of the inspirational leader like Marshal Ney was, like Blucher was, really effective commander. And even Napoleon said that Russia has no good generals except for Bagration. So he was well recognized on both sides for his ability. Number 12, Nick, General Schwarzenberg. I like Schwarzenberg just because, he captured Paris, he won Leipzig, and yeah, he lost Dresden, but there were other factors there that were pushing him into that battle. And I think more emotionally is when he visited Leipzig, 7 years later after the battle, and had a heart attack and died on the field because of all the men he lost there. I think that just shows that he wasn't this automaton. Like, the guy really cared about his troops. So shout out to Schwarzenberg there. 11, I had Marshal Blucher. Shout out to my Prussian fans. I think it was underrated as a tactician. And I mean, yeah, he lost a lot of battles to Napoleon, but he always kept his army together. He always came back to fight again another day. Big Marshal Blucher fan. Number 10, I have to have Marshal Ney on my list. He is my favorite marshal. Just inspirational to all of the French army. And I know he had some tactical hiccups, but I just admire the guy's work and courage throughout his career. Number 9, Marshal Suchet. I know he was the closest marshal to the border of France, but there are other generals and marshals in his territory that didn't do very well until Marshal Suchet showed up. So a big Marshal Suchet fan. Number 8, Marshal St. Cyr, defensive genius, really smart guy. Yeah, I know he was crabby and hard to work with, and I think Napoleon finally realized that. I think he said, this guy is someone I need to use, and thus he was a marshal. Number 7, Marshal Murat. Yes, I know. I'm a big Murat fan, but the guy basically saved Eylau for Napoleon. He performed very well at Dresden and the Egyptian campaign. He also performed well, capturing an enemy commander at one point. I don't think Napoleon would have gotten as far even with the Napoleon's coup in 1799. He needed Murat's help. So I don't think Napoleon's career would have gotten to the apex it did without Murat. Number 6, Massena. I think he's the most naturally talented of any general we'll talk here other than Napoleon. I mean, no real formal education. Did a lot with very little, and huge Massena fan. Number 5 is Suvorov for me. Really talented. If you look at the body of his work against the Ottoman Empire, I know we're talking the Napoleonic era, but the guy never lost. Yeah, you could say Zurich, but that was his vanguard, really, that was doing stupid things before Suvorov showed up, and Massena made them pay, and he was able to extricate that force somehow, and really talented General Suvorov. Number 4, Marshal Davout, Rachel. Love Marshal Davout. I would like to rank him higher. I know he had some problems on the retreat from Moscow, but who didn't? And I wish Napoleon would have utilized him more in 1813 and 1814. Number 3 is the Duke of Wellington. Yeah, he didn't lose a battle. Yes, he was against sort of the B team in Spain. But his focus on logistics, I think, is way underrated. A great example for all other generals after him that you have to have good logistics to win your battles. And I think he was supremely talented. Number 2, I have Marshal Lannes. I know that's controversial, but as we pointed out earlier, I mean, this guy had no formal military education. Davout, Wellington, and Napoleon did. Lannes did not. And for him to do as well as he did in Italy, in Egypt, in Germany, in Spain, again, where other marshals had failed, I think he doesn't get enough credit. I think he did the most with the least. And then, of course, number 1 is Napoleon. So that is my list. You may pick me apart now if you'd like, but let me know how I did. Let me start with the instructor first. How did I do, Mr. Hamel?
No real gripes about the list. I don't think we've really had any gripes about anybody's list. There's been onesies and twosies to nitpick at, but I mean, your reasoning makes sense to me.
Graeme, did I have Murat too high?
I'd say so, but equally, I see why you've done it. No, again, no problems at all with that list. A lot of them recur from list to list, don't they? Because they are, quite frankly, worthy of a place there. In a place or two here or there, up or down, isn't going to make a difference. So I like that good list.
Whether your business has 6 floors or 6 employees, Walmart Business has everything you need to save time, money, and hassle. You can restock your break room with bulk ordering or bulk up your ordering team with shared payments. And you can get it all delivered straight to your business's door, whether that's on Wall Street or Main Street. Walmart Business. It's the Walmart you love, now for your business. Learn more at business.walmart.com.
Say hello to the all-new Alexa Plus and see how Alexa can do so much more for you. Need tickets to see your favorite artist? Craving your comfort restaurant? Just sit back, relax, and talk naturally. Alexa's on it. It learns your style, anticipates what's next, and makes it happen across Echo, Fire TV, and more. Learn more at amazon.com/new Alexa.
Nick, did you like my Schwarzenberg placement?
Yes, it's very nice to have Schwarzenberg in there. It's funny that my dissertation on Schwarzenberg, and of the 3 people who include him on their list, I had him the lowest. I had him at 13th, and you had him at 12th, and Graeme had him at 7. But yeah, great list. Love Suvorov. He just didn't make mine. He dies in 1800, so just the longevity factor. But you do got to give props to what he did before that. And I don't care what people say. I think Murat's great. I mean, problematic, but I don't know. Finest horseman of Europe, so I think he deserves a lot of the praise that he gets.
Jonas, how'd I do?
I can agree with the majority. Maybe Murat a bit lower for me, but overall, a great list.
Okay. And Rachel, I'm good?
All good. No gripes from me.
Very good. Always being nice to the host. I love it. Okay, so we're going to jump into honorable mentions, and then I'm going to let my host go. Again, I'm going to do ladies first. So, Rachel, let me know your honorable mentions. They were really close to making the top 15, but didn't quite get over the hump.
LaSalle, Kellerman Jr., Oudinot, Murat. No, I'm not being held hostage. He gets it for the reasons you guys have all extrapolated on. And Marshal Lefebvre for no other reason than I love him.
I love that. I like the LaSalle, and I like the Marshal Lefebvre. That's awesome. Jonas, your honorable mention.
It would be pretty much a whole page, but I'll have to pick Moreau, Desaix, Saint-Hilaire, like criminally underrated in my opinion. LaSalle, and then maybe to wrap things up, you know what? I go for the underdogs. Grouchy.
Grouchy, love it. Love a Grouchy mention. That's fantastic. And a Moreau, that's really cool too. Okay, so going from there, we go to Major Michael Hamel, your honorable mention.
I'll keep it to one because the rest of my honorable mentions are on other people's list. Not a really well-known name, Spanish Captain General Antonio Ricardos. He invades France in 1793, does not lose a battle. He's really doing the best with what he can given Spain's institutional incompetence. And he holds his ground, and it's not until he dies that France is able to push back into Spain.
Love that. All right, Nick, who do you got?
I'll adopt the same approach as Michael because a couple of my honorable mentions were already on people's lists, like Eugene, for example. So my 3 that I want to mention, General Van Damme, probably the best non-marshal on the list. I mean, just say if he had lived long enough, would have been made one. So I don't count him. Napoleon famously said, if I was marching into hell, I would want Van Damme at the vanguard. Noteworthy praise. But then his aggressiveness gets the better of him at Culm, so that's a disaster. Gets captured. So that's why he doesn't make the top 15. General Bülow, Michael, I think Dr. Legere would love hearing that name. The winner at Denowitz against Ney, and also the winner of the Battle of Gros Baron. Very important in going against General Bernadotte's lethargic behavior. Carries the war to the enemy, so Bülow deserves a mention. And the other one is the other cavalry commander of the French army is Marshal Bessières. Bessières also commanded the Imperial Guard for a time. Very loved by the men. During a battle, they thought Bessières was killed. They stopped fighting and started crying. Napoleon famously said, wow, what a cannonball that was, Bessières. It reduced my guard to tears. Loved by the men, great leader. Unfortunately, is killed in the spring of 1813. I couldn't put him on the list because I wanted Murat on there, and I think Murat's better. So I had Murat low as I possibly could have humanly put him, so that's why Bessières got the cut.
Love it. Okay. Graeme, your honorable mentions, please.
A few were under the people's lists, like Hill, obviously the marshals. I missed off Suchet, Murat, Soult, and Ney, so they can all get mentions, Barclay. But I also want to throw in General Rapp, who was developing a very promising career when he ran out of war to develop into. So General Rapp will be the honourable mention. I would give one to Bernadotte, but I'm not sure if there's a huge amount that's honourable about Bernadotte. So given the shakes of heads, I'll not mention him.
Yeah. I had all those as well. I had Soult, de Tollet, Saint-Hilaire, Rapp, and General Hill as my honourable mention. But yeah, those are all good honourable mentions and all talented generals in their own right. Okay, So we finally come to the end, my glorious guests and listeners. And really, I want to, again, thank everyone, Jonas de Neef, Rachael Stark, Major Michael Hamel, Nick Kramer, and Graeme Callister for joining us. And yeah, it's been a really educational episode. It's good to hear different opinions and ideas. And I really thank each and every one of you for joining me.
Thanks very much for having us.
Appreciate it.